In 1929, the richest men in America went to sleep as billionaires and woke up unable to buy a loaf of bread. Within days, trillions vanished. When you were a kid,
Yippee!
you probably had a piggy bank. You put a coin in, and it stays there. It's simple. It's safe. It's the one place where your treasure can't walk away. And as adults, we like to think real banks work the exact same way. We give them our money, they lock it in a big steel vault, and it sits there, gathering dust, waiting for us to come back and get it. But here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody tells you. That is not how a bank works, not even close. The moment you hand your cash to a teller, it doesn't go into a vault. It leaves the building. The bank lends it to your neighbor to buy a house, or to a company to build a factory. In fact, for every $10 you think you have in the bank, only about $1 is actually there. The rest? It's just numbers on a piece of paper. It's an illusion. This illusion works fine, as long as everyone stays calm. But in 1929, something happened that shattered the illusion forever. The stock market didn't just stumble, it drove off a cliff. And when the market crashed, people got scared. And when people get scared, they want their money back. All of it. Right now. But remember, the money wasn't there. The piggy bank wasn't a vault. It was a magic box that had run out of tricks. This is called a bank run. Thousands of people rushing to withdraw cash that simply didn't exist. It was a stampede of panic that crushed the entire financial system. One bank failed, then another, then thousands. Within months, the life savings of millions of families were wiped out as if they had never existed. The Great Depression didn't care who you were. It didn't care if you were a tycoon or a janitor. It was a financial nuclear winter that leveled everything in its path. But to understand how we fell so hard, we first have to understand how high we were flying. To find the villain in this story, we have to travel back to the party of the century, the Roaring Twenties. Welcome to the 1,920 seconds. They called it the Roaring Twenties, and for good reason. It was the biggest, loudest, wildest party in American history. The war was over. The music was loud. The skirts were short. And the booze was illegal, which only made everyone drink twice as much. But the real party was in the economy. American factories were pumping out new inventions faster than people could buy them. Cars, radios, toasters. There was just one problem. People didn't have enough cash to buy all this cool stuff. So, the banks invented a new magic trick called credit. Buy now, pay later. It was a revolutionary idea. Suddenly, you didn't need money to be rich. You just needed a signature. Everyone was buying things they couldn't afford with money they didn't have. The entire economy was literally floating on a sea of IOUs. And where did all this credit go? The stock market. It became a national obsession. It wasn't just for experts anymore. It was for everyone. The optimism was so toxic that even the shoeshine boy was giving investment tips to Wall Street executives. Stocks only went up. If you bought a stock in the morning, you could sell it in the afternoon and buy a new car. It felt like free money. The barber, the cook, the elevator operator, everyone was playing the game. Nobody cared about the risks. The bubble got bigger, and bigger, and bigger. It defied gravity. It defied logic. Leading economists and politicians declared that we had reached a permanently high plateau. They said poverty was defeated forever. But while Wall Street was partying, the rest of the country was already cracking. Farmers were going broke. Factories were making too much stuff with nobody to buy it. The system was fragile. It was a house of cards built on debt. It just needed one tiny push to collapse. And that push arrived on a cool autumn morning. October 24th, 1929, the day the music died. To understand the crash, you have to understand the invention that caused it. Buying on margin. Let's say you want to buy a stock. It costs $100, but you only have $10. In the old days, you'd just go home and cry. But in the 1920 seconds, a broker would say,
kid,
no
want
problem.
$90.
You pay $10.
It's just
I'll
a
lend you the
little
other
loan.
$90. This is buying on margin. It's great, as long as the price goes up. If the bike's value goes to $150, you sell it, pay back the $90 loan, and keep $60. You just turned $10 into $60. That's a 600% profit. You're a genius. Everyone did this. Cooks, teachers, janitors. 90% of the stock market was bought with borrowed money. It was free money, but there was a catch. A very, very big catch. What if the price of the bike drops to $80? You sell it for $80, but you still owe the broker $90. You lose your original $10, and you now owe another $10. This is called a margin call. The broker calls you and says, "Pay me now, or I sell your stuff." If you couldn't pay, the bank took everything. Your house, your car, your clothes. The entire US economy was a skyscraper built on quicksand. By 1929, there was $8.5 billion in margin loans. That was more money than there was physical cash in circulation. The system was rigged to explode. It just needed a spark. In September 1929, prices wobbled just a little bit. Smart investors got nervous. They started to sell. Selling drove prices down. Lower prices triggered margin calls. Margin calls forced people to sell more. It became a feedback loop of doom. The snowball wasn't just rolling. It was turning into an avalanche. Thursday, October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. The market opened, and something felt wrong. The ticker tape machines, which printed out stock prices, started ticking faster and faster and faster. Someone yelled, "Sell!" Then another. Then everyone. Prices didn't just drop, they melted. Stocks that were worth $400 in the morning were worth nothing by noon. Imagine a crowded movie theater where everyone smells smoke and everyone runs for the door at the exact same second. At noon, the biggest bankers in New York met. They pooled their money to buy stocks and stop the crash. They tried to be heroes. It worked. For about 2 days, the weekend came. People went home, talked to their worried neighbors, and panicked even more. Then came Black Tuesday, October 29th, the day the dam broke. This time, no amount of banker money could stop it. Everyone sold. Nobody bought. The phone lines melted. The telegraphs jammed. People in Chicago didn't know if they were broke or rich because the news couldn't travel fast enough. You'd hold up a stock to sell it for $100, but by the time someone looked at you, it was worth $10, then zero. Fortunes that took generations to build were wiped out in minutes. On that one day, the market lost $14 billion. The floor of the exchange was covered in so much ticker tape, it looked like snow. But it was the snow of a funeral. When the bell rang at the end of the day, the party was officially over. Variety magazine ran the famous headline, "Wall Street lays an egg." But this wasn't an egg. It was a bomb. The shockwave traveled from New York to Main Street. Suddenly, cash was king. But nobody had any. You could buy a luxury car for $100. But who had $100? The stock market crash was bad. But what happened next was the real depression. The rich lost their fortunes, the poor lost their jobs, and everyone lost their hope. But wait a minute. Hold on. You might be thinking, who cares? I'm just a farmer in Texas. I don't own stocks.
Not my problem.
Let the rich people cry. Normally, you'd be right. But this wasn't a normal crash. The virus didn't just stay in the casino. It escaped into the real world. Why? Because Wall Street had lost all its money. And when Wall Street loses its money, it comes looking for yours. Remember that empty piggy bank? Well, the banks had a secret. They had lent all your money to people who were now broke. The farmers couldn't pay back their loans because crop prices crashed. The investors couldn't pay back their loans because the stock market evaporated. So when you went to the bank to get your cash, the bank literally didn't have it. It's like a game of musical chairs. Imagine there are 10 people, but only one chair. In a normal economy, the music plays, everyone dances, and nobody needs to sit down at the same time. But in 1930, the music stopped. Suddenly, everyone wanted to sit down. Everyone wanted their cash. But there was only enough cash for one person. The other 9, they got nothing. It started with rumors. I heard the bank on Main Street is out of money. Panic is contagious, even if you trusted your bank. Seeing your neighbor run made you run too. It was called a bank run. Banks operate on confidence. Once the confidence is gone, the bank dies in hours. When the cash ran out, they slammed the gates shut. If you were in line when the door closed, your life savings were gone. Poof. Just like that. In the first few years of the Depression, 9,000 banks failed. $7 billion in depositors' money simply evaporated. People stopped trusting the system. If you had any cash left, you didn't put it in a bank. You stuffed it in your mattress. But when people hide money, they don't spend it. And when they don't spend it, businesses die. The economy didn't just slow down, it froze. The Roaring Twenties were officially dead. The silence was deafening. Unemployment skyrocketed from 3% to 25%. 1 in 4 men had no job, no income, and no way to feed their family. But wait, where was the government? Where was the Federal Reserve? Surely they would save the day. Well, they actually made it worse. Much, much worse. By 1930, the economy was hurt, yes. But it wasn't dead yet. It was just buffering. Normally, this is when the lifeguard jumps in. The Federal Reserve is supposed to save banks when they are drowning. But in 1930, the Fed didn't throw a lifebuoy. They threw an anvil. And that single decision turned a painful recession into the Great Depression. You see, back then, money was tied to gold. The Fed was terrified that if they printed more paper money, they would run out of gold.
The central
So,
bank used quantitative
at the exact
tightening,
moment the
effectively
economy needed
sucking
more money
out
to
of
breathe,
system and
the
rapidly
Fed
shrinking
sucked
money
the air
supply.
out of the room. This caused deflation. Prices dropped, which sounds great, but wages dropped faster. If the boss can't sell bread for a profit, he fires the baker. If the baker has no job, he can't buy shoes, so the shoemaker fires his assistant. It was a vicious cycle. No money equals no spending equals no jobs equals no money. Then, the government had another brilliant idea to save American jobs, the Smoot-Hawley tariff. They built a tax wall around America. They taxed foreign goods to force people to buy American. But Europe got mad and taxed American goods back. Global trade stopped, American farmers couldn't sell their crops to Europe anymore. The food just rotted on the docks. And just when they thought it couldn't get worse, Mother Nature entered the chat. A massive drought hit the Midwest. The land dried up. The soil turned to powder. Then came the wind. It picked up millions of tons of dust and created black blizzards that blocked out the sun for days. This was the Dust Bowl. It was like living on Mars, but with less hope. Cattle died or had to wear goggles. Seriously. Crops died. The heartland of America was dead. 2.5 million people packed their lives into old jalopies and fled west to California, looking for work. They were called Okies. But California didn't want them either.
Turn around.
They were blocked at the border, beaten, and turned away. Homeless cities sprang up in public parks. They called them Hoovervilles, named after President Herbert Hoover, whom they blamed for everything. Empty
This,
pockets
ladies and
turned
gentlemen,
inside
is what
out
we
were
call
called
Hoover
Hoover
flags.
flags. Cars pulled by horses because nobody could afford gas were called Hoover wagons. The system had completely failed. The American dream was canceled until further notice. It wasn't just a panic anymore. It was a freeze. The heartbeat of American industry simply stopped. The most famous image of the decade was the bread line. Men stood for hours in the rain and snow, just for a bowl of watery soup and a piece of stale bread. In the line, there was no difference between a former CEO and a bricklayer. Hunger is the great equalizer. For millions, this was the only meal of the day. At night, the parks turned into shantytowns. The American dream had been replaced by a cardboard nightmare. Pride was swallowed. Men walked the streets wearing signs listing their skills, begging for any work at all. Birth rates dropped. Marriage rates dropped. People couldn't afford to fall in love, let alone raise a family. President Hoover kept saying prosperity is just around the corner.
Prosperity is
But the
just
corner
around
never
the corner.
came. 1,930 passed. Then 1,931. Then 1,932. It wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. We had hit rock bottom. And down there, in the dark, something dangerous began to grow. There is an old saying, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. But this time, the world didn't just catch a cold. It caught double pneumonia. American banks were desperate for cash. So they demanded all their loans back from Europe immediately, especially from Germany. And in the wreckage of the German economy, a very angry man with a funny mustache began to speak. Germany tried to print its way out of debt. It didn't work. It caused hyperinflation. Money became worthless. You needed a wheelbarrow of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. It was actually cheaper to burn money for heat than to buy coal. When people are hungry and desperate, they listen to anyone who promises a solution. Even a madman. He promised bread. He promised work. He promised to make Germany great again. And they believed him. The Great Depression didn't just break the economy, it broke democracy. Fascism began to spread like a virus. Back in America, a new president, FDR, promised a New Deal. He didn't wait for the market to fix itself. The government hired millions of people to build dams, bridges, and roads. If private companies wouldn't hire, the government would. It helped, but it didn't fix the problem. In 1939, 10 million Americans were still unemployed. The Depression dragged on. The world was a powder keg. Countries were fighting over resources. Tensions were rising. And then, on the 7th of December 1941, the spark finally landed. America entered World War II. And ironically, the worst tragedy in human history cured the economy. Suddenly, the government needed everything. Tanks, planes, bullets, uniforms. Factories ran 24/7. Unemployment dropped from 15% to 1% overnight. If you could breathe, you had a job. Women entered the workforce in millions. The Great Depression was dead. The war economy was born. It is a grim truth. The massive government spending on war is what finally ended the economic misery. When the war ended, America was the only superpower left standing. This led to the biggest economic boom in history, the 1,950 seconds. The nightmare was over. But the scars remained. We learned a lot from the crash. We created the FDIC, basically insurance for your money. If the bank fails today, the government pays you back. We also built a wall between regular banks and investment casinos, the Glass-Steagall Act. We made it illegal to gamble with grandma's savings. For 50 years, banking was boring. And boring is good. But memories fade. In the 90 seconds, we got greedy again. We tore down the wall. And guess what happened? The Great Depression taught us that laws can change, but human nature never does. Greed is a zombie. You can kill it, but it always comes back to life. 1,929, 2,000, 2008. The cycle repeats. Every time they say, it's different this time. It's new technology. It's the new economy. But gravity always wins. What goes up must come down. The banking system today is safer than 1,929. Sure, but it's still built on the same thing. Trust. And trust is the most fragile currency of all. Because money isn't real. It's just a shared dream. And we have to hope we don't all wake up at the same time. Just like they did on that Tuesday morning in October. So, that was the Great Depression. We fixed the laws. We fixed the banks. We promised never again. But 80 years later, bankers got bored. They invented a new, complicated bomb called subprime mortgages. And this time, they didn't just break America. They broke the entire planet. How did it happen? And why did no one go to jail?
Click here.
Click here to watch. The 2008 Crisis Explained. And subscribe so you don't miss the next crash.